Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Could I just ask everyone to just find a seat? Thank you. I hope everyone had a pleasant evening last night up on the 71st floor. Didn't get too dizzy with the height. It was very pleasant to see many of you. Yesterday, it was interesting to hear about the momentum of change across the industry. And also, however, the pressure on the markets. Being clean and green doesn't mean there's any entitlement to commercial success, of course. It just means you've got a meal ticket to be at the table when the game is going. And in the session after the coffee break this morning, we'll hear more about how markets are performing today and then into the next few years. And with the implementation of the many environmental measures on the existing fleet and new ships, there is certainly an anticipation there's going to be a great deal of tonnage available to be scrapped in the next few years, which should incentivize green shipping. Now, for this first panel this morning, we have perspectives from ship owners, regulators and governments about the impact of these changing regulatory frameworks on the market and how they're interacting. We've got a few presentations to start with and then a panel discussion before we break for coffee. So to kick off, if I could, I'd like to introduce Lucas Contagianus, the head of marine pollution for the Marine Environment Division at IMO, to present. Lucas.
Well, thank you everyone for the warm welcome. Anecdote, when I was coming here, my computer broke down, so I have no computer, so I'll be based here. My notes, otherwise I will freestyle it. So good morning everyone. Today is my privilege to represent the IMO at this long-standing and important forum that deals with the topic of paramount importance to the shipping industry, ship recycling. The global shipping industry, as we know, is responsible for transporting about 90% of world trade, with thousands of ships serving global trade. An inevitable part of the maritime life cycle is the retirement and recycling of vessels. Historically, this process, although essential, has posed significant challenges, particularly in the realms of environmental sustainability and safety. This isn't a new topic for IMO. If we cast our mind back 20 years ago to 2003, the IMO Assembly adopted the IMO Guidelines on Ship Recycling by Resolution A962/23. And the guidelines inter alia introduced the concept of a green passport for ships. And even back then it was envisaged that this document, containing an inventory of all materials used in the construction of a ship that are potentially hazardous to the human health or the environment, would accompany the ship throughout its working life. Of course, as is usually the case with all IMO instruments, the guidelines took into account the relevant existing body of work by ILO, the Basel Convention, and industry organizations such as ICS and BIMCO. 2 years later, in 2005, the Marine Environment Protection Committee of the IMO agreed that a new instrument should be developed as a priority, with a view to providing legally binding and globally applicable ship recycling regulations for international shipping and for recycling facilities. This decision was endorsed by the IMO Assembly at the end of 2005. And the work carried out subsequently under the auspices of the Marine Environment Protection Committee resulted in the International Convention for the Safe and Environmentally Sound Recycling of Ships, which was adopted in a diplomatic conference held in Hong Kong, China in May 2009. So this is a timeline of the countries that have adopted, acceded or ratified the convention from 2009 until this day. I'm sorry about the resolution, but they should be available later on. I think it's quite telling. So the efforts that led to the development of the Hong Kong Convention were borne out by recognition by all member states industry associations, and other stakeholders that ship recycling, if not done properly, gives rise to grave safety concerns and can lead to severe environmental damage. So what is the approach taken within the Hong Kong Convention to fulfill the call of the IMO Assembly back in 2005 to minimize the environmental, occupational health, and safety risks related to ship recycling? So firstly, the Convention requires that each party prohibit or restrict the installation or use of hazardous materials listed in Appendix 1 of the Convention on ships entitled to fly its flags. Currently, these hazardous materials are asbestos, ozone-depleting substances, polychlorinated biphenyls, and any anti-fouling compounds or systems whose application or use is prohibited through the AFS Convention, namely organotins and cybertrine. Furthermore, the Convention establishes an obligation for ships to carry an inventory of hazardous materials. The objective, of course, of the inventory being to provide ship-specific information on the actual hazardous materials present on board to be used by the ship recycling facilities in order to decide how to manage the types and amounts of materials identified in the inventory. Ships will be required to have an initial survey to verify the inventory, additional surveys during the life of the ship, and a final survey prior to recycling. When it comes to ship recycling facilities, they must be authorized by a party and must prepare a ship recycling facility plan addressing worker safety and training, protection of human health and the environment, roles and responsibilities of personnel, emergency preparedness and response, and monitoring, reporting, and record-keeping systems, taking into account all the guidelines that have been developed in the meantime. Before a ship can be recycled, the ship recycling facility must develop a ship recycling plan specific to each vessel that's to be recycled. It must specify the way an individual ship will be recycled depending on its particulars and its inventory. Furthermore, the Convention promotes transparency and sets the foundation for ship recycling states to develop their facilities and practices. For example, the ship recycling facility is authorized by a party. Such a party shall provide to those who requested information on which it based its decision to grant authorization. In addition, a list of ship recycling facilities authorized in accordance with the Convention and operating under the jurisdiction of a party, contact details for the competent authorities, an annual list of ships flying the flag to which an international ready for recycling certificate has been issued, including the name of the recycling company and location of the ship recycling facility, an annual list of ships recycled, information concerning violations of the Convention, and action taken towards ships and ship recycling facilities under the jurisdiction of a party. So that brings us to 2023. And 2023, being a momentous year for us in the Secretariat, we're not only taking the opportunity to acknowledge the positive effects of MARPOL, 50 years following its adoption, but it's also the year in which the entry into force conditions of the Hong Kong Convention were fulfilled. And as a result, as we've heard yesterday, the Convention will enter into force on 26th of June 2025. And what have we, within the IMO Secretariat, been doing in the lead up to the entry into force of the Convention? Apart from facilitating and supporting the work of the Marine Environment Protection Committee, which is our routine work, which has developed and adopted all the guidelines required by the Convention, IMO is working with recycling countries through workshops, training, and projects to help build the capacity and establish the conditions that will enable them to ratify or accede to the Hong Kong Convention. And a good example of this work is the IMO project Safe and Environmentally Sound Ship Recycling in Bangladesh. This has been funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway and has played a small but significant part in preparing Bangladeshi ship recycling yards and the government of Bangladesh and the various ministries involved to be ready to accede to the convention, which has taken place. So this brings me to the end of my speech slash presentation. And I'd like to close by saying for the maritime industry to remain sustainable and resilient, we must ensure that every phase of a ship's life cycle is handled responsibly, from its design and construction to its operational life and eventual recycling. And the Hong Kong Convention upholds this principle even though it's been criticized, and should be used as an initiative to propel us towards a future where ship recycling becomes a standardized, environmentally sound, and safe process globally. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lucas, for that very clear introduction this morning. And now may I ask Takoya Adachi, the Shipbuilding and Shipmarine of the Shipbuilding and Machinery Division of the Maritime Bureau of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism in Japan, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Takoya Adachi from Maritime Bureau, Ministry of Land Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism of Japan. It is a great honor for me to represent Japan's voice on the Hong Kong Convention to all of you today. And it brings me great pleasure to speak here at a time when the requirements for the entry into force of the convention have been fulfilled. As my speech aligns with this significant occasion, I'd like to begin by revisiting the history of the Hong Kong Convention. As you know, most ships are eventually dismantled for age and economic considerations, and more than 90% of parts and materials are recycled on a weight basis. Since the 1990s, countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan have played a leading role in ship recycling due to cost advantages and internal steel demand. But regrettably, in some instances, worker health and safety and environmental measures were overlooked, and resulting in unfortunate incidents, including casualties and environmental pollution. These issues garnered international attention around 1998. As a result, 3 international organizations, UNEP, IMO, and ILO, joined forces to discuss a framework for safe and environmentally sound ship recycling. The process of discussion took a very long time, but partly due to the challenges in adapting the Basel Convention to ships, Basel COP7 decided in October 2004 to invite the IMO to work aimed at the establishment of mandatory requirements to ensure the environmentally sound management of ship recycling. Subsequently, the IMO took the lead in the discussions, and it was clear, especially among maritime policymakers, that the discussion should take place within the IMO. And finally, in May 2009, the Hong Kong Convention was adopted, marking a historic international agreement aimed at ensuring a safe and environmentally sound ship recycling. An excerpt from the preamble of the convention says, "The parties to the convention, noting the growing concerns about safety, health, the environment, and welfare matters in the ship recycling industry, recognizing that recycling of ships contributes to sustainable development and as such is the best option for ships that have reached the end of life of their operating life, have agreed." This preamble highlights the Hong Kong Convention was agreed as a contribution to the sustainable development of the maritime industry, alongside addressing safety, environmental, and social issues. In July of this year, the IMO adopted a revised strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. The revised strategy includes an enhanced common ambition to reach net zero GHG emissions from international shipping by or around 2050, a commitment to ensure an uptake of alternative zero and near zero GHG fuels by 2030. In order to achieve this, it is essential to promote replacement of existing ships. And in this context, there will be high expectations for the future role of the Hong Kong Convention. Japan, as a prominent nation in shipping and shipbuilding, has recognized the importance of the Hong Kong Convention also from this perspective and has appealed to the international community for its early entry into force. So the early entry into force of the HKC is of paramount importance to ensure sustainable development and a level playing field for international shipping, because shipping is a truly international industry that requires truly international rules, not regional or local rules. Therefore, Japan is very pleased that the International Convention has fulfilled the requirements for entry into force. So far, Japanese public and private initiatives have actively supported the capacity building of ship recycling yards in major ship recycling countries. With regard to the improvement of the ship recycling yards in the ship recycling countries, Japan has made efforts through both public and private channels. For example, the government of Japan has planned to provide with financial support and official development assistance loan for the upgrading project to the yard of the recycling yards in India. The Class NK classification institution has supported the improvement of ship recycling through certification and technical assistance to the yards. As of August 2023, Class NK has issued statement of compliance to 60 yards in India, Turkey, and Bangladesh in accordance with the HKC. Also, Class NK contributed to the development of guidelines and a roadmap in preparation for the ratification of the HKC in Bangladesh. From owners' side, the Japanese Ship Owners Association has made it a priority to encourage its member companies to make use of convention-compliant recycling yard for the recycling of their ships. In addition, the JSA has sent a number of missions abroad to visit the yards on a regular basis and exchange views, including the interest of Japanese owners in upgrading the capabilities of the yards, particularly in South Asia. And the Japan Federation of Basic Industry Workers Unions provided with financial support for the establishment of a training center for the workers in India. On this slide, as there was already an excellent video from Bangladesh yesterday, there may be no need for me to mention, but I'd like to present the monitoring project of the last year by Japan. In order to meet the requirements for entry into force of the convention, particularly the requirement of ship recycling capacity of not less than 3% of the gross tonnage of the combined merchant shipping of states, Bangladesh was a promising candidate state, and we have worked to monitor its improvement. Last year's detailed monitoring by the consultant with the establishment of an expert committee confirmed the compliance of the targeted yards with the Hong Kong Convention. Please take a look at these pictures. The yard is very clean, tidy, and has impermeable flooring. Health and safety and environmental considerations have also confirmed. So the Class NK provided the SOC, Statement of Compliance. In this way, we have encouraged the public and the private sector to improve yields in Bangladesh by contributing and encouraging through monitoring. I have yet to visit these years in Bangladesh, but I hope so to do so next year. At the end, I would very much like to mention about this. In April of this year, the Japan-Bangladesh Summit meeting was held. During the meeting, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida expected that Bangladesh will accede to the Hong Kong Convention at its earliest opportunity. And then, Bangladesh Prime Minister Hasina expressed her intention to make efforts for the early accession to the HKC. In response, Japanese Prime Minister expressed to consider supporting Bangladesh's efforts in the area of ship recycling, taking into account Bangladesh's need for the development of a treatment, storage, and disposal facility called TSDF. The content of the cooperation is currently being discussed and researched at JICA, the implementing agency for Japan's ODA. But fortunately, not long after the summit meeting, there was a very pleasant surprise. Bangladesh ratified the convention. Also, Liberia also ratified the HKC on the same day, thus fulfilling the requirement for the HKC to enter into force. As a result, HKC will enter into force on 26 June 2025. It has been 14 years since the adoption of the convention, and although it has been a long journey, the road to the entry into force of the Hong Kong Convention is undoubtedly now paved, and further efforts to improve ship recycling facilities will ensure the future of ship recycling. We look forward to the next 2 years when the entry into force of the convention will be another monumental day in the history of the maritime industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Takoya. I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of talk in and around IMO, global maritime regulation, about capacity building, about sharing skills. And quite often that doesn't really seem to add up to that much, frankly. But in the case of Bangladesh in particular, and India before it actually, the role of Japan and Norway in particular have been very powerful and very effective. And I think it's a very bright lesson. And I hope we will hear a little more about that in a while from the Norway's ambassador to Bangladesh. Now, our next speaker this morning is Susan Wingfield from the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention Secretariat, and she will help us, hopefully, unravel some of the complexities of the interactions. Susan, no pressure.
Thank you for that introduction, Julian, and good morning, everyone. I see the crowd has thinned out a bit since yesterday, but I'm glad there are still some regulatory enthusiasts in the room. Well, thank you, first of all, to TradeWinds and sponsors for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I've been involved in this issue for many years, and it really is a pleasure to see quite a few familiar faces and to be back discussing ship recycling. I'd first like to start with a question to you. How many people in the audience actually know about the Basel Convention? Can we just get a show of hands? Okay, so a significant number. And how many of you think it's relevant to ship recycling? Okay, I'm heartened to see that. Well, I'm here to talk about why it is important to ship recycling, and I think it's important in more ways than you would instantly think. Okay, hang on. Multitasking. Right, so just to start off, to give a sort of picture of where the Basel Convention falls in terms of international law, some of you will know that international environmental law in particular is quite fragmented. In the chemicals and waste space, there are a number of agreements that are relevant to the chemicals and waste agenda. They appear here. I happen to work for 3 of them. The Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions all have different roles to play. Parties who ratify these conventions sign up to a set of provisions that they implement to ensure really the sound management of chemicals and waste, and this is all across the life cycle. We also have other agreements of relevance, Montreal Protocol, I'm sure many of you all know, ozone depleting substances, and fairly recently adopted Minamata Convention on Mercury. So yeah, there's a number of instruments that really could be of relevance to ship recycling and in fact are. But of course I'm here to talk about the Basel Convention. So Basel was developed, gosh, we're going back many years now, in response to this indiscriminate dumping of hazardous waste by developed countries and developing countries that took place in the 70s and 80s. And the response was to develop this convention, particularly with the aim to protect human health and the environment from adverse effects of hazardous waste. Now, there are 3 pillars of the convention, the first of which is prevention and minimization. This means prevention and minimization of the generation of hazardous waste, but also of the transboundary movement of hazardous waste. Second is the ESM of these wastes, or environmentally sound management. And lastly, which I think most of you will be, those who know about Basel, will be familiar with this control or prior informed control, prior informed consent of transboundary movements of hazardous waste. Now, it's important to say that this convention was never actually developed with the issue of ship recycling in mind. Rather, it was really to control the movement of hazardous waste from point A to point C with the understanding that it could transit through, for example, point B countries. Of course, the nature of international shipping, the notion of flag states, port states, recycling states, wasn't a perfect fit for the Basel Convention. And recognizing this, the Basel Convention has worked on this issue for the past, it's over 20 years now. One of the efforts of the convention is the guidelines that appear there, that little yellow box, that were developed. I mean, they're not legally binding, but they were really developed to give a sense of what particularly recycling facilities would need to do to become compliant in terms of environmentally sound management under the convention. But not only did we develop guidance, I mean, it's already been mentioned by previous speakers that there was a joint working group with IMO, ILO, UNEP, or Basel Convention, to talk about how to tackle this issue from the 3 perspectives. Our governing body, the Conference of the Parties, and this was already mentioned, back in 2004, recognized already that a ship could be considered a waste at its end of life, but could also be considered a ship under other international rules. So it already recognized that there were, some potentials for contradictory situations there. And for that reason, it invited the IMO to consider establishing mandatory requirements specific to ship recycling. Importantly, when it made that invitation, it mentioned that such requirements should have an equivalent level of control to that provided by the Basel Convention. So indeed, IMO took this invitation and ran with it. And as we know, the Hong Kong Convention was developed and adopted in 2009. Now, Hong Kong, of course, also recognise the ongoing relevance of both ILO and Basel Convention, particularly its standards, recommendations and guidance, and as is mentioned in Regulation 3 of Hong Kong Convention. So then the ball was back to the Basel court, I guess you could say, because IMO had developed this convention, and Basel parties at their 10th meeting in 2011 met and discussed, okay, well, they've developed Hong Kong Convention. Does it have an equivalent level of control as we were hoping? Now, unfortunately, there was no clear answer at that meeting. Some parties believe that there is an equivalent level of control. Others do not see that there is an equivalent level of control. And that is really where the case was left. There was an agreement that consensus couldn't be reached on the issue. So, fast forward to 2019, and the ban amendment, which has been mentioned already a few times, entered into force. Now, what is the ban amendment? Well, this essentially strengthens the Basel Convention, because those who have ratified the ban amendment, particularly aimed at Annex 7 countries. So what are Annex 7 countries? These are OECD countries, the EU, and Liechtenstein. They are now not able to export hazardous waste to non-Annex 7 countries. So this is quite an impact, as we've seen. We've already seen it in terms of the waste trade, that this has had an impact. I just want to mention again that it is only applicable to those who have ratified, so only those who've signed up to the ban amendment are bound by it. So there's 103 parties that have done so, including the European Union and its member states, and actually they're taking steps right now to revise the waste shipment regulation to include the provisions of the ban amendment. So let's see what will happen there and what that will mean for ship recycling, the EU ship recycling regulation. Norway has ratified the ban, for example. Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India have not ratified the ban. But I think what's important is that it is up to each party to the convention, of which there are 191, so we're near universality. It's up to them to decide how to interpret and apply the provisions of the convention. They're to determine when a ship is a waste and when to provide the provisions of the Basel Convention. So my last slide here. The pictures actually, the first one looks a bit grim. Well, it was actually. It was back in my first visit to Chittagong in 2008. It was quite, yes, confronting at that time, but having gone back successive times, and here's a picture of PHP Yard, the improvements have been remarkable, really, and I want to congratulate those who have taken the steps to improve their yards, because it's really amazing what they've achieved. But back to my presentation. Excuse me. My phone's going funny. All right, so what is going to happen in the future? Well, I hear many people saying to me, equivalent level of control debate has to be reunited again. We want this issue to go back to Basel, and we want Basel to say, now Hong Kong's entered into force, there is an equivalent level of control, Basel, just go away and leave us to it. We certainly don't want a situation where there are duplicatory instruments, but what you need to remember is that it is really the decision by for the governments to take. Myself as a secretariat or member of an agency, employee of the UN Environment Programme, for example, I can't make that decision. It's our parties who make that decision. So what could happen if there are parties who wish to see this issue come back on the Basel Convention? Well, we actually have a governing body meeting in 2025. They could discuss the issue then. It does seem unlikely that the convention would be amended, but who knows? Anything is possible, to be truthful. It is worth asking, though, if consensus couldn't be met on the equivalent level of control debate back in 2011, is there a possibility it could be met now? So I'm sure that's in the minds of many different Basel parties. Now, I just wanted to mention this idea of the Hong Kong-Basel interface because we have continued to engage with ship recycling facilities, particularly in Bangladesh, also in Pakistan, because we're really trying to be, from a Basel perspective, pragmatic about things. We recognise that there are these requirements, particularly the ban amendment, but we're also recognising that it's important that these countries, ship recycling countries, have adequate downstream waste management capabilities. So we've really worked with those countries, as I mentioned, with IMO. I worked a lot with Nikos Michaelis on this pragmatic approach to say, okay, if we apply Hong Kong at the ship recycling facility downstream, well, Basel does apply because it applies to the environmentally sound management of waste. So how can we strengthen the interface there between the Hong Kong Convention and the Basel Convention downstream? And I'm really happy that to hear that Japan will now step forward and really provide the support to Japan, to Bangladesh to develop the TSDF facility. That is really, really good news. One of my last points is coexistence and complementarity. Well, the fact of the matter is international treaties do coexist. And under Basel, you know, we cross over on in many different areas with other international treaties. Now, it's important to note that there is provision under the Basel Convention for parties to enter into bilateral or multilateral agreements or regional agreements regarding transboundary movements, provided they don't derogate from the ESM of hazardous waste as required under the convention. So case in point is the EU ship recycling regulation. I really want you all to remember that governments really are king when it comes to regulations. They're the ratifying bodies of conventions, Hong Kong and Basel alike. It's their decision to sign up. It's their decision on how they apply the provisions of the convention. And then also at the end of the day, it's their decision collectively whether or not they're going to amend a convention. So that's important to keep in mind. I think what's certain is that we really need to strengthen our engagement that we've had in the past with IMO, with ILO, to make sure that going forward we really can provide support and clarity where possible on the ship recycling issue to parties. We've done it before with IMO. You may be aware that the issue of the Probo Koala many years ago, a ship that dumped waste in Côte d'Ivoire, that really brought about a change in how port reception facilities, well, we hope, are managed, and looking at strengthening the interface between what happens at a port reception facility and downstream. So there's no reason why we can't make similar steps or continue to make those steps for ship recycling. I just want to end with one message, I guess. We really need to talk about downstream management of hazardous waste. Hong Kong Regulation 20 requires that waste from recycling facilities is only transferred to a waste management facility authorised to deal with it in a safe and environmentally sound manner. So, of course, as I've said, Basel applies downstream from the ship recycling facility. The issue is that waste management is an expensive enterprise, setting up the infrastructure and so forth. As KG said yesterday, for South Asian recycling states, it's one of many developmental priorities that they have. For this reason, I really hope that all stakeholders, all those concerned in the ship recycling chain, can maybe look past the notion that Hong Kong stops at the yard. It's not a reason to relinquish responsibility for the downstream. I mean, if the principles of CSR and ESG are to be upheld, downstream management of the residual waste from ship recycling really needs to be properly considered. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to discussions.
Susan, thank you very much for that very clear and rather inspiring overview of the situation. I think the key issues you brought out about the aspirations of these many rulemaking initiatives over the years to stop ultimately the developed world dumping its waste on people who have been unable to deal with it for their commercial gain, such as the Probo Koala case was a graphic and horrific example those many years ago. And then that all these institutions are built of individual nations. It's one thing I'm always stressing in my day job, as it were, in TradeWinds, that when we talk about regulations, we don't talk about the IMO as some nebulous gas out there that is responsible for itself. Yes, there are individual executive members of that, but the IMO is made up of member states. And those member states are the people who drive the debate, take the decisions, ratify regulations. They are the ones that are driving these things. They also drive this other network of other conventions, global conventions that do need to coexist. We can't wish them away. They have been developed in their own piece for good intention, even though the effect can be complex to those on the ground. Anyway, next up is my pleasure to invite Captain Mohammed Shafiq, who is representing Pakistan at IMO for the Ministry of Maritime Affairs in the government of Pakistan. Captain Shafiq.
Thank you very much. As you can see, I have put my first slide countdown. We often refer, oh, we have 2 years. No, sorry, it's not. It is just this time is ticking. To be precise, from today, it is 623 days. So we all need to pull up socks. As a state, member state of IMO, we have this responsibility of implementing everything in there, and of course we are going in to ratify. Very shortly you will hear this news when we submit our instrument in IMO. So this is the timeline we are dealing with. Why it is important for us. This is the UNCTAD report, our maritime economy, and you can see the biggest line over there is our ship recycling. We have all other maritime activities. So as an state, we have a big responsibility to look after our recycling fellows or our recycling facilities. We were under a lot of criticism that our government is not doing enough. But there was a reason behind, there was a rationale behind. This is what we had. We are one of the oldest industry in Pakistan, was even at the time in 1940s or 50s, we were doing the ship recycling. I would not be wrong if I will say we were one of the pioneers nation who were doing the recycling at that time. And of course, we were all manual at that time. But the state has their own challenges to deal with. And we all subcontinent nations, Bangladesh, India, we are all blessed with unique geographical locations or nature has given us this opportunity to do certain things. This was the elephant in the room for us. But that is not the only elephant in the room. We haven't ratified it. We have delayed in ratification of this one just because we are also signatory to Basel Convention. We are also signatory to Rotterdam Convention. We are also signatory to Stockholm Convention and ILO elements or multiple things. So we need to fully implement all the downstream elements and other elements. It is not, there is no point signing on left, right, center, and you cannot implement it unless you have a necessary infrastructure to do that. That is why Pakistan has bite what they can chew, and now, touch wood, we are in a position that we are able to ratify the Hong Kong Convention. What challenges do we have in a state? As in a state is the protection of an ecosystem. That was our biggest challenge, because ship recycling industry is not an only industry for this trade. We have our fisheries, we have other allied industries, we have downstream elements. So we were doing multiple studies as an state to make sure that our belt and braces are in place for that. And one of those were looking at the ecosystem, looking at the fish or our food chain. I'm just referring here National Library of Medicine USA study about the fish in our environment. And these were the sampling on our Gadani coast. We have done up to 140 miles, 150 miles from the coast of Gadani, where the active ship recycling is going for decades. So the finding was very pleasing, that there were no such thing found in the marine species, and our all fish are fit for the purpose. So that was one of the things. The other big challenge, as my learned colleagues have said, TSDF facilities. We have TSDF facilities 30, 40 miles away from it in the major Karachi thing, not in the immediate vicinity of the ship recycling facility. But I'm pleased to announce today that we have allocated 27 acres of land to build the new TSD facilities to save the carbon right in the Gadani area. So, but of course, we are looking for some assistance. Another challenge which we have taken so far, that we have never asked any international agency or any support from any country for doing whatever we have done so far. But of course, now the time constraints is there, and we are knocking certain doors. IMO is assisting us, and a lot of countries are assisting us in getting there. So, our nature, southwest monsoon, we are exposed to the sea, and that is a blessing and a challenge both ways. And of course, a scarcity of resources was one of the challenge we have. In past, the literacy of labor, we were in the bad limelight because of some incident. And of course, my other colleagues have said that in Southeast Asia, we have migratory labor in many countries, and literacy level is one of the challenges. But now we are dealing with it, and we are dealing with all the ILO and our country ILO country manager is supporting us, Geneva is supporting us for training our labor. We are not only protecting air, sea, and soil for all those conventions for which we are signatory to. So we have health the policies which we are rigorously implemented, although my ship recycling colleagues often bash us that our government is not is slow. No, we are not slow. We are making sure that we are able to show our face to international community, and we are doing our responsibilities rightly. Another thing which is there, as I said, we are all uniquely blessed. Our friends in Bangladesh are uniquely blessed. Turkey, India are uniquely blessed. They can do the different activities from the side of the ship, front, left, right, center of the ship. We are not that uniquely blessed. We will have to cut the ship from the front. That is one challenge we have. And that is because of, I will explain it. Of course, beaching is the process, it is always referred, where we had to put it on a tidal mud flap, and the vessel is grounded almost flat on the beach in the high tide. And of course, most of the ship breaking operations usually take place on intertidal, or in the low tide or mid tide level when the vessel is not submerged fully. And cutting operations can take place around the ship when ship is not in water. And of course, it is difficult for containment of certain pollutants in that area, but we have the technology is coming better, and all our colleagues are trying to protect their environment. So the beaching is where, of course, this is the word used. This is a picture where the ship is fully sitting on the mud flat, and you can see, and the the recyclers can cut the ship from left, right. They can even remove the propeller. They can cut from the front. They can cut from the back. And we are not that blessed in that. But how we are blessed, I will show you in a bit. So this is again another beaching thing. You can see the ship is being cut from the side and left, right, center, wherever they want to do it. So this is how the ship is placed, and they are able to do the work whenever the water allows them to work. There are 4 recognized methods. Of course, one of that is also lending. So we are also blessed. The concept of lending is from this thing. You know, when in the world wars we have fought, we were used to lend to get when only the bow touched the beach or the sand. And these were very frequently used that. And since then, the word lending or term lending is used. And this is the same thing used in Turkey. Ship bow lands and ground from the bow section only, and most of the vessel is floating and a propeller is operational. And of course, this can only be done when there is a low tidal difference. Pakistan is blessed with we have very low tidal difference like Turkey. Turkey is of course a better one. Ships are driven onto shore, beach, and of course on a concrete or extending to the sea. The key feature is aft of the ships is always remain afloat, and ship can be dismantled by floating cranes on the side and on the front. But of course, side activity is there is a risk of falling debris into the sea. So we, at the moment, we are not cutting from the side. Our ship recyclers are only cutting from the front, which is more environmentally safe. So coast need to be natural. You can't build the coast for doing this operation. And of course, the role of the gradient is very important. And this is the kind of gradient which we are blessed with. And of course, the pixels are not so good. So, but you can see it when you will see there. This is a Turkey image where they are just touching the bow to do the landing of. That is why they call it a landing method. And USSR is also accepting that method. Most of the ship is remain afloat. They have a low tidal range, and same Pakistan has got also a low tidal range. This is Pakistani beach, and you can see the intertidal area is very, very small within the bow area. And you can see most of the ship, this is a low tide picture. And you can see when the water will go on high tide, it will go to the end of the golden sand line. But the challenge for us that we will cut from the top, and we have made an SOP or a method where they will keep the double bottom intact. So it is used as a big drip tray or containment place where they are cutting from the forward and keeping all the debris there. So this is the ship which is landed on the golden sand just on the 8th of October. And I received this picture, so I've added to my presentation. You can see after nearly 6 decades or 7 decades of ship recycling, our coast is as golden sand as you can see. So we are protecting the environment. And of course, as a state, we are bashed by our own people that our regulatory regime is very strong and you don't let us do our job. Yes, of course, we cannot compromise on environment. We had to protect our ecosystem, and we have ships can be landed 24/7. This is the good thing about us, that we don't have to wait for any tide. 365 days a year, no tidal restriction at all. This is our coast, very straight coast, exposing to the Arabian Sea, and of course you can see one larger scale and one small scale chart of it. So Pakistan landing capacity, this is one of the question which is often asked. We are underutilized. I'm pleased to say that the landing capacity which we have allocated so far, we have more, is about 1256 acres of land we have allocated just for this activity, and we are monitoring. Our provincial government, our central government are the monitoring authorities for it. We have divided that space into 314 ship recycling facilities. This is the potential we have. If 4 acres each, they can berth or land multiple ships at one time on each plot. So currently we are only utilizing or authorized as a recycling facility of 132 yards, which are being used. But we have a further capacity already exist for investment or uptake where the requirement would be for 182 ship recycling facilities. We are open to international investment. If anyone applies to government, we will let them have the plot and they can do their own recycling activity or make a partnership with our existing recycling facilities. More than the double of current capacity is available for as our ship recycling. Local and foreign investment is of course welcome. So I have kept it short and sweet, and of course we will answer in the panel. Thank you very much, and it is our responsibility to keep it green. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Shafiq, for that. Now, next up we have Espen Richter Svensson, the ambassador for Norway to Bangladesh. Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm very honored to be invited to speak to such a distinguished audience, and I'm proud to be here. And it's, for me, such a luxury to actually be able to address an audience where I don't need to explain what ship recycling is and why it's important. I don't need to tell them about the HKC or what it means. So you can start from a different point. I have heard this morning from Lucas that Norway has played a small but a significant role through the Senstrek project, and that is what I am here to tell you a little bit about. So Norway's involvement in this process or in this project dates back to 2008, at the time when the HKC was under negotiation and sort of coming to life. Our then Minister of Development and the Environment, it was a combined ministry, Erik Solheim, he received in his office in 2008 a delegation from the NGO platform on ship recycling. There was a little guy who was desk officer for Bangladesh in the ministry at that time, who also was the note taker in the meeting, and that was me. So I was there, and after the meeting, we saw some very explicit and very disturbing videos from the ship recycling industry in Bangladesh. And after the meeting, the minister pulled me aside and said, "Espen, we need to do something here." And I sort of believe that it started in this way, our involvement, and this led to a dialogue between many partners, but not least with our own shipping industry, eventually with the IMO and with Bangladesh also. And it led to a visit to the yards in 2009, where this photo was taken. It did not look very nice, I must say. This visit, I think, turned out to be something of a watershed in our work on this, and it sort of led to this commitment from the Norwegian government to actually step in and try to judge this process forward. let's see. So we started the dialogue process with all the relevant stakeholders, and let me just with the IMO and with the government of Bangladesh, and with the civil society, with NGOs, with everybody, and it led to the decision to set up this Sensorec project. But it took time. I mean, all these preceding processes lasted for almost 5 years. So it took until 2014 until we actually could start the project. Phase one was to find out where are we and what do we need to do. And then that was quite a deep dig into the complexities of this industry. And of course also with since by then we knew what was in the Hong Kong Convention. There was in the phase one of the project, it resulted in 5 work packages. 2 studies assessing the economic and the environmental impact of the ship recycling industry, an assessment report after a compilation of hazardous waste inventory in Chattogram, and training materials and courses for workers and managers on health, safety and environment, and also then preparing for the phase 2 of the project. Phase 2 was to sort of start to implement these things, start the training, start the preparations for the entry into force of the Hong Kong Convention. Also, an institutional and legal roadmap towards ratification was established. And around 1,000 workers, including training of trainers, skilled professionals and other stakeholders, have been trained. And since Norway is Norway, we also put in a little part about gender in there. Imagine that. The reason for that was that we discovered that there was a provision in the legislation in Bangladesh saying that women were not allowed to work in this industry, full stop. So we don't like this kind of provisions. So we made a note of that, and we also put it into the project. Maybe I'll get back to that. Okay, then phase 3, and that is where we are now, and we're going to have Inception workshop on that in a week or 2 from now. Is all to do with the ratification and the TSDF preparation. And Norway, like everybody else, was very encouraged that it was decided by Japan to step in and finance and also to carry out, I think, this TSDF work. I mean, it's extremely important that this facility enjoys the respect and the, how to say, the confidence of everybody involved. So that is underway. That is phase 3 of the Sensorec project. Okay, the ratification then. That has been sort of my crusade, in a way, since I came to Dhaka 3 years ago. I've had numerous meetings, and very good ones, with the Ministry of Industries in Dhaka, several visits to the yards, and also I have been successful in bringing in stakeholders to see actually the progress that has been made on the ground in Bangladesh. So only this year we had a vice minister come for environment to come and see, and to also to try to encourage the government at that time to ratify. We brought in the Norwegian Ship Owners Association and their CEO. They had never been to Bangladesh. Never. And that goes for so many. I mean, it's astonishing for me to hear how many have never been to Bangladesh. It's number 1 in ship recycling. the #1 country. Also, the Norwegian ship owners brought with them the European ship owners and the global organization for ship owners, and also BIMCO took part in that visit. So that was really quite an important step. And we saw that 2 months after that, I think, that actually the government did ratify. One of the reasons why we were able to pull off this ratification was that these extremely complex provisions in the Hong Kong Convention about entry into force meant that if Bangladesh were to ratify in 2023, as they were under a legal obligation to do, then that, together with Liberia, would trigger the entry into force. But if they did not, if they put it off to 2024, it would not be enough with Bangladesh, and maybe it would never have been possible to get the HKC to enter into force ever, because the global tonnage keeps growing and becoming more and more difficult to meet the criteria of the convention. So that, I think, also played a role in actually the ratification of the convention by Bangladesh. Now the situation is that it's, as our Pakistani colleague said, it's 89 weeks to go until it actually does enter into force, so there's not much time. And in Bangladesh now you have 4 yards duly certified, Class NK. And I visited a couple of weeks ago another 6 yards that are on the way, and we know that others are following. So there is a momentum, and there is a development now which is extremely encouraging. I'm trying to read my own slide here. That one is too far away, and this one is too good. And my print here is very, very small. So my life is difficult. Yeah. So we are also hoping that this process that we have seen, and this the progress of our project in Bangladesh can serve as an inspiration also for other countries. And for example, we just heard from Pakistan. We want to also see, of course, Pakistan get on board. Okay, the prospects and the future. Now that all the requirements have been met for the convention to enter into force, and we are well underway in establishing the TSDF, I think it's extremely important, as we just heard this morning, that we get an international regulation of this, which sort of doesn't have too many overlappings and too many conflicting sets of rules. From Norway's side, we want to see global rules on this. We, of course, are party to the Basel Convention and the other conventions, but now we want to see the Hong Kong Convention take precedence on ship recycling, so that the ship owners and the shipping industry can actually send their ships to any certified yard, no matter in which country it happens to be. And at the moment, there are problems for European ship owners to send ships outside of Europe. So that is what we are hoping for, and that we can see the necessary harmonization in the coming years. And I was encouraged also to hear about the work going on in that respect. One thing I'm slightly worried about is the role of the European Union in this, because the European regulation is under revision, as it has to be after 10 years. But where is the EU here? Not really. I mean, they should take it 2 or 3 rows in this room, I think, in this kind of discussions, because they have an extremely important role to play in bringing their own legislation in line and in harmony with the global regulations. So that is one concern that I'm left with. Also, I try to say whenever I speak about this that the entry into force of HKC is not the end of the road. It is the beginning of another road, maybe, but it really is when we will have new tasks, new challenges, but it is an important milestone anyway. And I just spoke the other day to our minister, Erik Solheim, who was the guy who said we need to do something here. I gave him an update on the situation, and he was astonished to hear about it. And he said, this clearly shows that the path we took to engage through the IMO with both the government and the industry in Bangladesh, it was indeed the right path and the very good choice. And we're very happy that we did it. And now we're looking forward to the next stages. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, thank you very much for that presentation and those comments. I think that's quite an inspirational story, actually. The role of the individual, dare I say it, to some extent, the role of international development and working towards a just transition, actually paying dividends here. On the note of Europe, by the way, I should say that we did invite the European Commission here. They were unable to send anybody. I wouldn't comment further on their internal machinations. It's unfortunate they weren't able to be here again. And Ambassador, my apologies for the small print in the various presentations. That was rather unfortunate. Now, finally, this morning, it's my pleasure to introduce Sheikh Fazal Amin, the Additional Secretary of the Ministry of Industries in Bangladesh, to present to us. Is he here?
Oh, thank you for giving me opportunity to say on behalf of Bangladesh, and a special thanks to the concerned official of TradeWinds forum to invite me. So actually, hearing the all presentation from yesterday, actually I was confused what I will present before you, because all the speakers, including the Norwegian ambassador, has told about the Bangladesh as activities on ship recycling. So that's why that is why I'd like to start like this way. That is that the practice of ship breaking in the world started mainly during the British Tudor dynasty, that is in the 1475 to 1603. That is why the British were called the pioneers of the shipbreaking industry, which is adopted by Italy in 1892 and Japan in 1896. Shipbreaking, being a heavy industry-based sector, was initially developed in developing countries such as the US, UK, Germany, Italy. However, due to the strict environmental regulations and high tax fines, the work was subsequently relocated to shipyards in Asian countries such as China, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. As the environmental regulations and wages in these countries are relatively low, the journey of the shipbreaking industry in Bangladesh began due to the natural disaster instead of the proper planning and implementation. During the cyclone of 1960, a tidal wave in the Bay of Bengal caused a Greek ship named MD Alpine to capsize off the coast of Fozdarhat in Sitarkunda Upazila due to the ship being severely damaged to an unrepairable condition. That the Greek company did not take any action to rescue the ship, and it was stranded for a long time in 1964 when I was born. And Chittagong Steel House purchased the ship and began dismantling it for scrap using very limited number of machinery and unskilled labor. The ship was able to be scrapped, and hence the birth of Bangladesh shipbreaking industry. In 1974, the commercialization of Bangladesh shipbreaking industry began. In the 1980s, Bangladesh shipbreaking industry grew very fast due to the lack of proper labor laws and weak environmental policies, and hence this period is known as the golden age of Bangladesh shipbreaking industry. According to research, the industry has maintained an average growth rate of 14% since the 1980s. According to the World Labour Organization, ILO, there are currently about 90,000 fleets in the world, amongst which about 500 to 700 ships are scrapped each year. But if the number of tankers, cargo and container ships are added, then the number will reach around 3,000. In the world, 92% of all shipbreaking takes place in Asian countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan and Turkey. So, now what is our strength? What sort of initiative government has done? Now I would like to inform you that government of Bangladesh included this ship recycling as an industry in our industrial policy 2011, and that is the main theme that in the industrial policy there are some incentives for the ship recyclers. Okay, and Bangladesh shipbreaking recycling rules was enacted in 2011. Bangladesh ship recycling zone was declared in 2011, and enactment of Bangladesh ship recycling rules in 2018. These are the legal tools for our development of ship recycling facilities in Bangladesh. And as of now, in 2022, we are able to dismantle about 52.4% of ship in global tonnage. That is total number of ship recycle facilities in our country is 108. Annual recycling capacity is 10 million gross tonnage, and market share in terms of number of ships is 30%, and in terms of gross tonnage is 40%. So already about the growth I have told about it is 14%, and still we are importing 2.5 million tons of scrap steel from abroad to meet our local demand, and from the internal ship recycling, the internal demand is made by 60 to 70% of countries' raw iron, and output worth is that is 800 million USD dollar per year, and revenue earning 100 to 120 million. And here in ship recycling industry, 200,000 plus employment is direct, and indirect is here. The numerous trends helping achieving this sustainable development. Already you have heard about this Sensex project through Norwegian government. There are 3 phases, already 2 phases already gone. Now Norwegian ambassador already told about the output of this, impact of this 2 projects. And now we are running with this phase 3 project. This is the TOT training, etc. training of the workers in ship recycling industry. And now we are dealing with Sensor project phase 3, which inception workshop will be held on 8th November this year, and we are going to revisit the objective of this project, because you know already you have heard that we need to develop the TSDF. Already JICA has given us assurance they are going to give in terms of their technical as well as financial support for development of TSDF in Sitakundo, where is our ship recycling facilities is working over there. So government is still, they are committed. That's why they have already did another feasibility study in Bodishal division in Borguna Jala. Already initial feasibility study has been done, and we are hoping that in coming few years we will be able to develop another ship recycling zone in Bodishal, due to considering the importance of this ship recycling industry in Bangladesh, because you know, we are continuously have our GDP growth of say like 7% on an average, except the COVID period. Because you know that we have already we will be graduating in 2026, and our Honorable Prime Minister has set our vision that we will be developed country in 2041, and we will be also smart country and 2041. That's why we need diverse development, including this ship recycling facilities. So in this project, what we need from the Norwegian government assistance, that's, you know, you have already know about the hazmat, that is hazardous material, but this we need to send to for laboratory, for testing purpose. We don't have international standard laboratories in our country, so we have to send the sample to abroad for that result. So that's why in this Sensor 3 project, we do need assistance from Norwegian government, and to request them to set an international laboratory, so that we don't need to send a sample in abroad. So we have our own capacity, so that we can test in our premises. Okay. And what else? This is already I told that in Borguna district we are going to settle another ship recycling zone. And after HKC certification, what is the scenario in our country? We have already, you know, that we have 4 ship recycling facilities in our country, which is HKC compliant, also plus. Also, they have got the Japan standards. And presently we have 108 number of ship recyclings. Out of that, 60s are active. And in this year, another 6 will come. And we know that we have only 2 years to make compliant with the HKC standard. And at that period, another, say, we are hoping that 30 or 20 to 25 year will be HKC compliant. What about the rest of the ship recycling facility? So in that case, we need the support from the development partners to develop, to make compliant our other years, because they don't have like PSP or SN Corporation financial capacity, because they are the group of industries. They have diverse industry in our country, but other years they don't have that much financial ability. So from the summit was held in IMF in London, we appeal to the World Bank or other or financial development partners to help to provide soft loans to our shipyards owners, which would help them to make the compliance according to the Hong Kong Convention. So according to the Hong Kong Convention, we developed the ship recycling board, which is headed by our senior secretary, and the member secretary is the additional secretary, and other ministry and stakeholders are the members of that committee, so that they could get their different certificate within 1 or 2 days. So we need financial and technical assistance for TSDF. which is already committed by JICA. They are working on this. Already a feasibility study is done, and now they are reviewing that feasibility study, and they have placed a work plan. And we have requested JICA, though their timeline is a bit extended, they are hoping that within 2030 they will be able to establish TSDF in our country. But we requested them, JICA, to lessen their period, so within 27 or 26 they can able to construct the TSDF in our country. And we have earnest request to the our World Bank and our developer countries to come forward, and we do hope from this forum that we will get assistance from them which would help us to make our rest of the years as HKC compliant. So these are you have already seen the yesterday about PSP. You have enjoyed the video. These are the photographs of. And finally, I want to tell about the any act, rules, convention. These are not the Bible. These are the dynamic document. According to the need of the present or future, this convention or acts, rules can be amended with calling a meeting. So that's why at present Asian countries are giving the leading position on ship recycling industry. So it is just a message that we can easily amend any rule, any convention, act, etc. It's not a problem. So we have to change our mindset. According to our demand, according to our present demand, or anticipating the future demand, we can change any convention, any rule, or any policy, but because these are dynamic. With these few words, and I would like to conclude here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Sheikh, I mean, thank you very much for those comments there. We've heard a huge amount of information this morning, and just to reassure you, all the presentations will be present in the wrap-up email you'll receive after the event. So any data points and the pictures, of course, will be in there as well. Now, we have before coffee, we've a discussion about some of the implications of these issues with a number of the speakers you've heard, and then a few other presenters, I'm pleased to say. So could I welcome back to the stage Takoya from the MLIT, Susan from the Basel Convention Secretariat, Lucas from the IMO, and Captain Shafiq from Pakistan. And also we're joined by Martin Kroger, the CEO of the German Ship Owners Association, and Gudrun Janssens, the Manager of Intergovernmental Relations from BIMCO. So if I can ask them to join me up on the stage. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I know it's a little bit tight. It's funny with these the little mug shots we have on there. We sort of, it's sometimes nice to get people in line, but it's always a sort of psychological challenge for people, whether it's necessary. We've got about 40 or so minutes for a conversation on some of these things, and I'd like to, as well as discuss some of the higher level issues of the implications of the interaction of these regulatory frameworks on the commercial realities of the ship scrapping world, actually think a little about the practical implications of what will happen in 2 years' time, initially, and how the obligations are changing. And if I could go to Lucas Kontogiannis from IMO to start off with. Lucas, so on the midnight on the 26th of June 2025, what happens? What do we turn into pumpkins? What will people have to do? What will people have to do that they hadn't done in the past?
Okay, thanks, Julian. So I've had many experiences where I've dreaded the lead up to a regulation entering into force. This isn't one of those cases. So firstly, before we go to the midnight of the 25th of June 2025, there's a lot of work to be done in the meantime, from encouraging more member states to ratify the convention, to capacity building in ship recycling states, preparations for port state control, guidance, many things. And to me, this seems like a transition similar to when the ISM code was introduced, the International Safety Management Code, where shipping companies had to introduce a lot of procedures. But it also seems similar to the adoption of the ISPS code, where port states, or ship recycling states in this case, have to do a lot of work for the implementation. Nothing drastic will happen on the 26th other than the fact that parties to the convention, or ships flying the flag of parties to the convention, will only be able to recycle ships in yards that are HKC compliant. So in theory, that will restrict the pool of ship recycling yards if there hasn't been a major upgrades in all of them. But it will also mean that there will be business opportunities for the ship recycling yards that have made the investments. In terms of the IHM, new ships that are constructed after the entry into force, the shipyards will have to provide, the shipbuilding yards will have to provide the IHM, so classification societies will have to get that prepared, and also it means that the IHM for new ships will be there in place, and the main emphasis will be on maintenance of it if you've got a new ship. And of course, existing ships will have to comply within 5 years to have an IHM, and also, or just before they enter a ship recycling yard. So there won't be a cliff, it will be a gradual transition. And I think the work that has been done so far by industry, Intertanko, ICS guidance, BIMCO guidance, contractual obligations, and also, to say that the EU SRR has paved the way for preparations to be in place, and for shipping companies and ship operators that fall within the scope of the EU SRR, at least for ship obligations, are relatively well prepared for the entry into force of the HKC.
Just to be clear, somebody asked me last night of the scenario where there is a ship flagged in a non-party state. Let's, for example, say the Marshall Islands, a small flag that a few may have heard of, but that hasn't already ratified the convention. In July 2025, an owner of a ship flying the Marshall Islands flag will be obliged to scrap in a Hong Kong compliant yard.
Is that what you took from my intervention? Yeah. If the Marshall Islands is a party, yeah, but they're not a party, so in theory they could scrap in a non-compliant yard. Yeah. But
if a Marshall Islands ship was going to a yard in, say, Bangladesh?
Yes. In theory, no yards in Bangladesh should be receiving ships that are non-HKC compliant. So in theory, all the shipyards that are allowed, given that Bangladesh is a party to the HKC, they should not be recycling.
I think they can.
in a practice that isn't compliant with the HKC convention. Of course, they won't have the IHM, the Marshall Islands, the international IHM certificate, but they need to have documentation that is equivalent to the IHM certificate.
So as we were talking yesterday, the weight of responsibility going to the national authorities in the ship scrapping nations to rigorously ensure the yards are compliant and that non-compliant yards are not receiving ships that's where the focus will be. Could I turn to Gudrun from BIMCO at the far end there? Gudrun, is your perception that the world's ship owning community that you represent many members of are ready for this change?
Well, first of all, I agree with what Lucas has been saying. It's going to be indeed a gradual entry into force. And as far as the ship owners are concerned, I think there are two main things, right? First, the inventory of hazardous materials. And a lot of ship owners have had the opportunity to already start implementing it due to the EU ship recycling regulation. However, what we see there is that I think at the last Commission meeting in June on the regulation, EU regulation, it has been told to us that about half of the IHMs were not compliant, which is worrying. And this is, you think they had 14 years as EU member state and as ship owners to prepare, and still only half of the IHM were compliant. This is maybe partly due to the ship owners, but obviously also due to the I'm not sure if it's lack of guidance. I'm sure it's difficult for post state control officers to start with this, and maybe a lack of experience, and it will have some toothing problems, or how you say it, growing pains. But yeah, so there's definitely some work on that end.
Is it clear what are the key areas of lack of compliance of the IHM?
I think it's a divided responsibility. It's maybe indeed ship owners still learning, and there's a trouble there is, as pointed out in a paper by Intertanko and Intercargo, the problem with receiving appropriate material declarations from the suppliers. But it's also difficult, as we have heard from other stakeholders, to have good inspections and everything. I mean, the IHMs are the cornerstone of the Hong Kong Convention, as has been discussed yesterday. So everything starts with good IHMs, and good IHMs can be there when there's proper inspections. Inspection is crucial to have this global playing field in the end, because we need all ship owners to have good IHMs and not like half-half.
Thank you. Martin Kroger from the German Ship Owners Association. Martin, are your members ready for the Hong Kong Convention entry into force?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe we are ready. I mean, we've been training the system with the transitional guidelines which have been published by ICS BIMCO et al. We've been training this enforcement of the Hong Kong Convention for quite a while now, so I believe we are ready. But having said that, I mean, what will be the standard in 2025 that we need to comply with? It will not only be Hong Kong, as we heard. It will be rather a confusing side of Hong Kong, Basel, some kind of European regulation, which nobody knows how it's going to look like in 2025. So this clarity that the industry is actually expecting from the member states has not been delivered yet, and it will not be delivered by just, enforcing the Hong Kong Convention. We need more clarity on that horizon. What is happening with the Basel Convention? What do you expect of ship owners to do? Because currently, of course we can comply with the Hong Kong Convention. That is not the problem, because you can do your IHM and prepare for that minute when the convention comes into force. But what do you expect us to do? What is Europe actually expecting us to do? Shall we comply with the Hong Kong Convention, or are we then legally prosecuted in the EU because we are breaching some other EU regulation which has been adopted by the same member states, by the way? And it is a rather confusing situation, I would say. So Hong Kong, it's great that it's entering into force, that's not a question, but the clarity that we need as industry, is not given to us yet.
We'll come back to some of the issues about Europe in a short while. But actually, just in terms of Hong Kong, are you satisfied that the policing, the prosecution of false declarations is there is a framework with enough nations involved in this to actually drive best practice compliance?
I believe so, because we had this system of flag state control, port state control in force for such a long time now, and it actually proved to be a very stable and very sufficient system to put control over ship owners and whatever standards you set to ship owners to comply with. That system has proven to be a workable system, so I believe that should work, yeah. At least on the ship owner side, because with the flag state jurisdiction in place and the possibility to control the performance of flag states via the port state control is a pretty sharp sword, I would say, yeah.
Captain Shafiq, you're talking with some confidence that Pakistan will ratify the convention in due course. While India and Bangladesh are on a steep development and learning curve in this, you will be on an even steeper curve with the need to implement physical changes as well as the regulatory regime reinforcement. Are you confident that you will be able to deliver that?
Yes, I'm pleased. Our state have already written the Ship Recycling Act. Out of the 6 guidelines of IMO, which is regard to the practices of or compliance with the ship recycling facility, ship recycling plan, we have written a code for it, and implementation is technically there. We are working hand in gloves with our ship recycling facilities and telling them to do this thing, this thing, this thing. Because we haven't asked for international support earlier and we were trying to do everything on our own. But I'm pleased to say today that IMO is holding our hands, and lot of, we are thankful to Norway. The Norwegian ambassador is working very closely with our government, very similar to Bangladesh. And they will be working, they are already working with us, and next month the experts team, Gruden and many IMO team are in Pakistan and they are working for it, and we are also working with other international partners with it. Yes, construction of the ramps and certain blocks is already started. It is in the planning phase, but we have that time. Yes, it is challenging, and very similar to sensor program of Bangladesh, we are embarking on a program with IMO, thanks to all the member states who are assisting us. It will be a sharp curve, I would say that, yeah, it's more steeper curve, but if there is a will, there is a way, and we will not disappoint.
You make a very good argument about the hard landing and the low tidal fluctuation in the waters of Gadani. But your golden sands are not an impermeable floor.
Yeah.
I frankly would be disappointed to see some of those sands, if they're in good condition, being concreted over in a way. But however, those are the necessities. Could you just explain how you resolve that contradiction?
The thing is that we are our SOPs or the working condition is that we are encouraging our ship recycler to use the ship as a containment, the whole ship, cut from the top and bring the stuff to a production area. That production area would be concreted. It will have all the drainage system, everything, for it, and that will be constructed as per the IMO regulation, which is explained in the IMO guidelines, one of the 6 guidelines for approving the ship recycling facilities. And of course, the experts, international experts are going to guide us further, who are visiting next month to give us further advice on that. That is why we were holding on to the ship recycling facilities plan. Can you just hold for 1 month, and then you can start your construction for all those impermeable flooring, so that it is up to a little higher standard, you know, because as one of our colleagues said, that the regulations are dynamic. So we need to future-proof our, you know, facilities, so that if something comes on or higher standard will come on, we will be able to comply with it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel again. So,
Susan Wingfield from the Basel Convention Secretariat, you made a very clear presentation and talked about the coexistence and complementarity of the regulations. But as you hear from Martin, the ship owners are throwing up their hands in horror, and that we can't meet all these standards. We'll come on to whether in a moment that may be throwing up a bit of a smokescreen. But do you believe there can be a sort of a diplomatic route through this tangled web in the next few years?
That's an easy question. Well, I mentioned in my presentation that, you know, it's possible this topic could come before the Basel parties again in 2025 if enough.
There is a meeting where it could be on the agenda? Indeed,
in June 2025. So if there is this issue is raised by parties and they wish to put it back, that's fine, to clarify how Basel would apply to ships going for recycling. That is a possibility. We've seen decisions taken by our governing body to clarify, for example, the convention's application to plastic waste, to e-waste. There's no reason why it couldn't be done for ships going for recycling. But looking forward, I think the ban amendment is really the big ticket item that ship owners are going to have to consider. The EU is obviously dealing with it in a certain way, and of course I can't comment on what they plan to do with their waste shipment regulation and what that will mean for the EU ship recycling regulation. But I think we all have to be mindful that the EU is party to the ban amendment, and that will probably have some sort of an impact, I would have imagined. Otherwise, it really is down to how parties wish to apply the convention to ships. So it's parties' discretion as to when a ship becomes a waste. It's parties' discretion as to which of these instruments they apply. I mean, Hong Kong is built for purpose, right? There are many similarities, right, between Basel and Hong Kong, actually. You look at the system of consent, the fact that under Basel, we want to ensure that there is the consent by the exporting party, the importing party, the existence of a contract there whereby environmentally sound management has to be ensured. Well, you could look at the Hong Kong Convention and say, well, there is a system of matching an IHM with a ship recycling facility. The consents needed from, you know, the administration or flag state and the importing state or recycling state. So there are those similarities there. And then I've also mentioned about how, you know, the complementarity of the agreements to ensure ESM of the waste, but the fact that we really all need to play our part in that way. So I think all I can say really is watch this space. It would be, for Basel, I think, a very interesting topic to take up again, but again, not in my hands. But let's wait and see. Yeah.
Indeed, and going back to my rather dog-eared copy of the Hong Kong Convention here, there are references in the convention to the Basel Convention, that it notes that exists, and it's not doesn't go beyond, and it works in accord with international conventions. So the very nature of this means that it is designed to be complementary to other conventions rather than to be succeeding as such. Takoya Adachi from Japan, could I ask you, thinking of the practical measures that are needed for hazardous waste management on land post recycling, how difficult is it for the likes of Bangladesh and then in Pakistan in the future to put in place those facilities. We saw figures just there of 40 to 60 million, which is a not insignificant investment. Do you believe this is from support from countries such as Japan and Norway, they will be able to implement adequate facilities?
Yes, I believe the cooperation from Japan to Bangladesh will pave the Bangladesh to TSDF operation and constructions. So, but in the implementation stage, there should be the regulations from the Bangladesh to implement the operations well. Yes.
It's very easy just to talk about hazardous waste in a generic sense. What are the most difficult byproducts that require handling?
Yes.
Is that possible? Do you
Yes, it's a difficult question, but I assume that sending the disposal to the facilities, it takes a bit a long time, maybe, perhaps, yes, and the regulation in their countries should approach to the transport of the waste during to the facilities.
Martin, could I turn back to you on the question of we heard yesterday from Haresh in India about he was claiming that ship owners are gaming the rules to some extent at the moment, partly because of the low market levels, but partly because of the arguments over compliance. Do you believe that's passing the buck, or should owners be taking greater responsibility, frankly, for managing their own waste?
Well, definitely they should take on responsibility. I mean, that's what it's all about in the end, right? You take on responsibility over the end of the life process of the product that you are using for quite an amount of time. So, but we as ship owners are very simple people. We just need one standard, that we can follow, and we can promise we will follow that. And life is very simple if you are like a European ship owner sailing a ship under a European flag. Then you know that you have only one country where you can recycle for the time being, and that is Turkey, because all the other European yards are basically out of business because it costs too much money to recycle the ship in a European yard if they actually have capacity available, because most of the recycling yards named on the European list are repair yards, they are not recycling yards. And if I look at how much it cost back in the days to recycle the Costa Concordia in Europe, I don't know if you followed that case, which was of course a tragic event, but you had to recycle the vessel at some stage, and it cost 100 million euros. It cost 100 million euros to recycle that in an Italian yard. So that gives you an idea of what figures we are dealing with in Europe. So it's a simple life in Europe. You go to Turkey, you recycle your vessels in Turkey, but also Turkey has, in a way, limited capacity. You have the capacity you have in Turkey, but no more, of course. And we saw it especially in COVID times, when a lot of cruise ships were recycled, especially in Turkey, that capacity ran quite full. So what do you do then? And the answer is you most probably reflag. You use another flag, and then you of course have a choice of other yards that you can use. And there, especially India, with a lot of yard capacity, with the statement of compliance under the Hong Kong Convention, is a very promising candidate to recycle with high standards. Bangladesh as well. You have very highly sophisticated facilities. What I am missing is the recognition in the regulation, especially in the European sphere, of the progress that has been made in South Asia when it comes to raising standards. And that is kind of divided from the responsibilities that the ship owner has. That's more the responsibility of the legislator. If you reach a point where you can actually see yourself the progress that has been made, why don't you recognize that in the regulation that you put on the market as well? And Hong Kong, of course, does it, the Hong Kong Convention, but the European regulation until now doesn't do it, and that's quite a pity, I must say.
you mentioned the reflagging issue, and I would agree with you up to a point, but there are owners, not necessarily the most high-profile owners, who reflag and then go to non-Hong Kong convention.
Yeah, but you know, reflagging, sorry to come in on that, reflagging is a very normal process in shipping. It has basically nothing to do with ship recycling, because you can reflag your vessel whenever you want. And if you have a charterer which says, you know, you have a vessel under the Cyprus flag, you want to go to a Turkish port, then you reflag, because otherwise, you know, you won't be allowed to actually enter the port. It's just one example. We have plenty of these examples around the world, you know, but it's a reflagging has basically nothing to do with ship recycling. And shipping, of course, is an international business.
You must admit it is used.
Well, yes, of course it is used, but I mean, you know, if I look at the German market, for example, and if my members, you know, call me, what shall we do with our old ship? I tell them, don't recycle it, sell it in the second-hand market, because otherwise, you know, the pitfalls that you're entering when you give your vessel for recycling in the moment are just too, you know, there's just a little too much. So you're better off if you just sell the vessel to the second-hand market and leave the other owners to deal with that problem of ship recycling.
Simple.
Yeah, we are simple people.
Simple, innocent people in a very complex world. let's leave it at that.
That's how it is.
Thank you. The situation of the second-hand market is very, very high profile for Japan as well. Gudrun, could I ask you for your perspective on the situation in Europe? I'm not asking you to speak for Europe, but your understanding of the situation. As I say, we did invite the Commission here today, but they were unavailable to attend. What is your understanding of the debate within the Commission and with member nations about how to revise the ship recycling regulation at present?
Yeah. So indeed, the revision is ongoing. It's a certain article, I think 30.4 or something of the ship recycling regulation. But now the Hong Kong Convention is coming into force. There's another article in the regulation, it's 30.2 or vice versa, which says that the EU shall, and it's clearly a shall, the EU Commission shall revise its regulation 18 months prior to the Hong Kong Convention coming into force. So 18 months prior to it, that means 26th of December this year, the Commission shall have revised, and if appropriate, this shall submit a legislative proposal to align, I think the words are to align the European ship recycling regulation and to avoid duplication of work or something, or administrative burden. So, but unfortunately, the Commission has already kind of indicated that they won't be able to make it. You think they too had 14 years to prepare, but apparently they did not find the time to have a look at the Hong Kong Convention and see how it could be aligned to avoid duplication and administrative burden. So that is a concern. I mean, as Martin said, we clearly look, as an industry, and as everyone knows, we clearly look at global regulations to regulate the industry, which has been quite effective for all these years. I mean, we have flag state, port state control. With the Hong Kong Convention, we'll have recycling states enforcing their aspect of the convention. So yeah, we look at the global regulations, and there I see, and I must also agree with what Susan has said. I think it's not about the conflicts in conventions. The conflict is how we must look at the solution, not at what's dividing the convention. And I think there's valid arguments, and ideally we take the best of both worlds, the best of the Basel Convention and the best of the Hong Kong Convention, or the Hong Kong Convention to apply on ship recycling as a whole. So the Hong Kong Convention is perfectly fit for the industry when you apply it throughout the life cycle analysis of a vessel. And then the Basel Convention is very relevant and needed when you talk about the waste management and the further beyond the art, as they say. So I think, yeah, we clearly look at the global regulations to solve this. And if you have then a third party coming up with rules that interfere or contradict, or it's very hard to see that work.
And of course, it should be remembered that the EU regulation was written in anticipation to drive ratification of the Hong Kong Convention to catalyse some action. And you could argue if you wish to, that it maybe has catalysed some action, that the Hong Kong Convention is squeezed in through the window at the last minute, thanks to Liberia and Bangladesh.
Yeah, and I think at the moment where the IMO, we must also be frank about it and be clear. At the moment, the IMO was not discussing ship recycling. Thank God there was the EU to keep the topic on the table. But this having been said, I also wanted to point out that, as Susan said, the Basel ban is now clearly, since 2019, came into force. And it might change the perspective, but then I think back in 2011 at the COP in Cartagena, I mean, the EU was a proponent, was really fighting for the equivalent level of control. And back at that time, the EU already had a Basel ban into its waste shipment regulation. So, in my view, nothing has changed. Nothing should prevent the EU for taking that paper they submitted in 2011 and just resubmitted. And in that regard, it's unfortunate that the EU, or it's, well, I'm going to say silly, but that's probably not very diplomatic. It's a pity that the EU is reintroducing ships into its waste shipment regulation, because that's taking a step backwards. Because assume we find a solution at Basel level, right? Within 2 years, the Basel COP, the solution is fine of coexistence or reinforcing or however we want to call it. Then the EU will need another 2 years beyond that to redo the changes they're doing now into the waste shipment regulations. So you keep on going, but yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them what their reasoning was, but it would be interesting to hear, though.
Let's hope by this time next year there's an answer to that question. Lucas, with the Hong Kong Convention entering into force in 2 years' time, it'll open the door to the possibility, the potential to amend it, to develop it, to expand it, to update it. Is there any emerging agenda of how it could be, should be amended and updated in any practical sense so far?
So far, no. I mean, all IMO instruments, and we were celebrating 50 years of MARPOL this year, are evolve over time. The Hong Kong Convention was adopted in 2009. We've seen a lot of progress in ship recycling countries in terms of bringing up standards and training and health and safety. And I think one of the takeaways for me from this forum is that, you know, these last 14, 15 years, there's been an improvement in the capacity in ship recycling states, and therefore there's now a better platform for the convention to be amended, potentially introduce new requirements. From what I see, at least in the near future, the main thing is to make it, to implement it globally and in a harmonized manner. I doubt that any amendments will come soon. If there is any amendments, from my experience, it would be to clarify or to introduce the guidelines into requirements, or parts of the guidelines into requirements, if they're seen that this will benefit harmonized implementation. But yes, the tacit acceptance procedure is in the Hong Kong Convention, meaning that if an amendment comes through and 2/3 of the parties agree to it at the MEPC, then there will be a period of acceptance, and then that will enter into force. So there's no need to explicitly ratify the convention again. And that creates a relatively smooth process for amending. But on the other hand, it means that in the MEPC you need strong consensus in order for an amendment to come through. So there's that kind of trade-off with the tacit acceptance procedure, that during the discussions, I don't like the word negotiations for a technical body, but during the discussions, the agreement has to be strong and the commitment needs to be evident in order for an amendment to go through and be implemented in an efficient way.
Could I just open it up to the audience? If anybody has any questions, we've got a microphone down here. Pia, please.
Susan, I was wondering, is it possible for the Basel Cup to tell us in 2025, what amendments need to be done in the Hong Kong Convention in order for it to be equivalent?
Oh, okay. Interesting question. I mean, there is an easy answer there that it would not be for. What Basel COP could do could be to possibly invite IMO to consider introducing in its, regulations or guidelines specific aspects. It's not a situation that I would necessarily see because the parties or governments negotiating within the IMO are essentially the same within Basel. And I think we have to respect that there is enough national coordination within these governments to ensure that they, are happy with the work they've done in the IMO forum and the Basel forum. I think that in 2025, it may be Basel parties may recognise the need to, develop some guidance to clarify how the two instruments can work together, for example, the coexistence, complementarity aspects. But in terms of one body asking another like that, I would say it's quite unlikely.
Any other questions? Should be a microphone, Will.
Sorry, this is perhaps a slightly naive question. Hong Kong Convention and SRR is a matter for flag state, effectively. WSR Basel matter for the environmental agencies, competent authorities. Yes, they operate under the same government, but if I think of the tensions in the UK between the MCA on the one hand and the Environment Agency on the other, which is replicated 190 odd times over around the world, I'm not sure it is quite as straightforward to say, the governments have a developed position within themselves. How much can Basel COP, Hong Kong Convention, parties, etc., work to bring those different voices, and they do have different, reasonable different concerns between flag state and environment agency. How much can be done to encourage those bodies to come together?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Any takers, Susan?
Yeah. Well, if I could just say that having worked for the UK government many years ago and on their UK ship recycling strategy, and I did have the joy of trying to bring Department for Transport and Environment together on this issue, and it was done. It is possible, I have to say. But in terms of what can be done within Hong Kong and Basel to encourage that collaboration, well, I think in the past we've seen examples, such as the joint working group that was established going back many years between the ILO, IMO, and Basel Convention, or UNEP, and that really brought together, each separate interest could have a number of parties, and brought together the different interests and different voices. So I think that type of mechanism could be possible. I think, there's a lot to be done between secretariats as well. Like, we do work closely with IMO, we have done in the past. As I said, on the port reception facility issue, we've worked closely. But again, I will say that it is really sort of a national level coordination concern that as secretariats we can't really get involved in, but we can certainly work together as secretariats to try and, encourage a joint understanding.
Could I put that issue to our two government representatives here? Captain Shafiq, are there tensions between the two or three sides of your internal government agenda, if you include the labour ministries, perhaps? How are you resolving the tensions between those?
I won't use the word tensions, but yes, there were different point of views and why we were a bit delayed in ratifying was getting the concurrence of all the ministries, because the responsibility of ship recycling is not on Ministry of Maritime Affairs. It is Ministry of Labor, Human Power Development, and of course our Ministry of Environment. And they have their own stringent regulations, and how we can interact with each other and all the different agencies. There are 79 agencies in Pakistan who are going to work for this convention. We have our explosive departments, because we have our nuclear waste department, ministries, and all those need to work this. As you might be aware that the digitalization of maritime is happening, and 1st January 2024 is the deadline for maritime digitalization. Pakistan has created a Pakistan single window operation. I'm pleased to announce or inform you that, and we have developed maritime single window operations. Everything is digital, everything is transparent on that, also for the international agencies, and intergovernmental relation for the objective of this particular Hong Kong Convention. So all those things will be on the electronic portal of which we call it Maritime Single Window, and that is of course part of the larger Pakistan Single Window operations, and that will be available, and everyone can see how the ship is deleted, where the last drop of XYZ chemical has gone. All those information would be available on that system. Of course, the people will have to ask for the access to that, and we are happy to do. So the harmonization is going on. We have done a lot, but I will not say we are perfect. We will have teething problems, but I hope we will be able to resolve it by the 26th of June 2025.
Takoya, could I ask you the same question, how you were resolving the tensions between the different agencies in Japan?
Yes, from my perspective, the Hong Kong Convention was adopted within the IMO, and the Basel Convention was adopted by the Conference of Parties to the Basel Convention, and EU SRR is adopted by the EU jurisdiction. So there are so many different key stakeholders and members, and especially the Basel Convention was adopted with consensus, on a consensus basis. So it is very difficult to harmonize ideally to those three regulations. So, but Japan recognized the importance of ensuring the proper recycling of ships in accordance with the Hong Kong Conventions and other regulations. So to achieve this goal, we expect that, and we do that, regulatory authorities in each area, country, jurisdiction provides operational guidelines to their respective industries.
Julian, could I just add one thing? And I think having worked with Bangladesh before the Sensorec project, for example, and after, the big difference from, I guess you could say, a UN agency point of view is this one-stop service that they set up. And I think that this should really be replicated. So we've seen the slide in various presentations that there's a long list of different ministries that are really brought together under this one-stop shop, if you will, and that really ensures that there is that national alignment. So I think that type of model, and I think Turkey has something similar, I think that type of model is really to be embraced and going forward.
Thank you for that. And could I say thank you to all the panelists and the speakers beforehand. If you'd like to give a round of applause in appreciation. Thank you. In about half an hour after our break, we'll have a session on market dynamics led by William McLachlan from HFW, who you just heard from that question a little earlier. Looking forward to that. And thank you for the attention, and see you in half an hour or so. Thank you.